With 295 electoral college votes, Donald Trump won yesterday's presidential election. He will become the 47th president of the United States in January of 2025 when he is sworn in. Trump's return to the White House was powered by a realignment of the American electorate that upended decades of traditional coalitions as he maintained his majority support among men and white voters without college degrees, but made dramatic inroads with Latinos, first time voters, and middle and lower income households. And Vice President Kamala Harris attempted to allay disappointment and offer words of empowerment to hundreds of supporters as she conceded the presidential election this afternoon, as some of her backers wiped away tears while she spoke. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for. But hear me when I say the light of America's promise will always burn bright. Those are some of the remarks from Vice President Kamala Harris at her alma mater, Howard University, this afternoon as she made her concession speech. And for many Democratic voters, Vice President Harris's loss to Donald Trump was disappointing but not surprising. Many said in exit interviews that their party uh, hadn't done enough to talk about the economy and lamenting lingering racism and sexism. Democratic voters in battleground states say they see many reasons for her defeat. The abbreviated campaign, just 107 days, a lack of economic messaging, many disagree on that, a drift too far to the left on social issues, the war in Gaza, and bias against Harris because she is a woman of color. And the Justice Department officials have been evaluating how to wind down the two federal criminal cases against President elect Donald Trump before he takes office in January to comply with long standing department policy that a sitting president can't be prosecuted. The latest discussions stand in contrast with the pre election legal posture of Special Counsel Jack Smith, who in recent weeks took significant steps in the election interference case against Trump without regard to the electoral calendar. And Latino voters took a big right turn in an election dominated by voter outrage over the high cost of food and housing, helping Donald Trump to secure a second term in the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris finished with a slim majority of support from Hispanic voters at 53%, while Trump vacuumed up about 45% of the Latino vote, representing a 13-point increase from 2020 and a record high for a Republican presidential nominee. And Republicans have reclaimed not only the White House, but control of the U.S. Senate. Now all eyes are turning to the House of Representatives, which Democrats see as their last line of defense to stop President-elect Trump and his agenda. The fight for the majority over the House comes with enormous stakes. With many competitive races still not called, NBC News has not yet projected which party will control the House in 2025. But given Trump's decisive victory over VP Harris, House Republicans are feeling bullish about their chances of preserving their slim majority. And Senator Elizabeth Warren has a message for all Americans. She urged her supporters in an Instagram video to continue fighting for their values, that is, without conceding hope. She said Donald Trump won the election and the consequences will be real and devastating. She also said, but she's reminding herself and all of us that on the road ahead, there will still be opportunities to fight back. And in that fight for the House of Representatives, that is, Democrats are facing an uphill climb to net the 4 seats needed to flip the chamber. With dozens of races still uncalled and many looking very close, Democrats would need to hang on to all of their competitive seats and flip a few Republican seats to get to the 218 seats needed for the majority. Meanwhile, Republicans need only win a handful of those competitive races to hold on to their majority in the chamber. And Donald Trump has floated a wide range of proposals that he says would improve America's financial picture, many of which will require action from Congress, where Republicans will control the Senate and hope to control the House. Among Trump's economic plans are deporting millions of immigrants, putting sweeping tariffs on all goods coming into the U.S., encouraging more oil production, lowering corporate taxes, and eliminating taxes on Social Security income and tips. The nation's leading expert says all of Donald Trump's plans could, in fact, sink the economy. And as many are mourning the loss of the presidency and the U.S. Senate, that is, Democrats are mourning, well, there are many also rejoicing at the fact that two African American female won their U.S. Senate seats. Angela Alsobrooks in the state of Maryland will become a U.S. Senator, and Lisa Blunt Rochester in the state of Delaware will also become a U.S. Senator. With Blunt Rochester and Alsobrooks joining the small ranks of Black women who have served in the Senate, we can now say that this country, in its hundreds of years, has had 5 Black female senators, 2 from the great state of California. Current Senator LaFonza Butler, who will turn over her seat to Adam Schiff, who won his election to be U.S. Senator for the state of California, and our VP, Kamala Harris, was only the second Black woman to serve in the U.S. Senate beyond the Carol Moseley Braun, that is, the great senator from the state of Illinois. That is the news of the day, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I'm going to be joined by Professor Andrew Carl. He is a history professor at the University of Virginia, also the author of a book called The Black Tax. Also, Jamar Brown is joining us in the first hour of the show. He's a former executive director of the Texas Democratic Party and current executive director of Color of Change. That is a political action PAC. Glad to be in conversation with Professor Carl and Jamar. Jamar is going to have a lot to share with us about what went wrong with that race for Colin Allred, who was polling really close to Texas Senator Ted Cruz, but Ted Cruz went on to win that election. This is the second high-profile Senate race in Texas where the Democrat has come up short, even though there are people who believe, due to immigration and migration into Texas, that Texas is becoming more of a purple state rather than a red state. But these two big losses for candidates, Democratic candidates challenging Ted Cruz, I think causes us to think twice before we put Texas in the purple category. In hour 2, we're going to continue our analysis, our post-election analysis. We're going to dig deep into some of the numbers. We've got a lot of numbers already in terms of the popular vote, in terms of the electoral college vote, in terms of the demographics, who voted for whom, which demographic. Ed Sanders, a veteran political analyst and strategist, is going to join us in hour 2, as well as Richard Green, who's also a veteran political strategist. Want to hear from both of these guys in terms of what went wrong. Lots of people are asking that question. Many people believing the polls that had Kamala Harris and Donald Trump neck and neck going into the election yesterday. Some that actually had Kamala Harris up in 3, if not more, of the battleground states. The tremendous momentum coming out of the August DNC, the $1 billion raised by Kamala Harris, the incredible coalition, the myriad of celebrities from J-Lo to Beyonce to Oprah Winfrey to John Legend, Bruce Springsteen, Spike Lee, Samuel Jackson, you name it, the campaign, Harris's campaign, had A-list celebrities, Julia Roberts. I mean, the list goes on and on, George Clooney. Many of them were out on the campaign trail, even on Tuesday, standing in line with college students, encouraging them to stay the course, to stay in the lines. Also, many of them offering free concerts leading up to the election. Many of them, voicing ads and showing up at rallies, giving heartfelt speeches like Cardi B, who gave the most passionate speech I've heard from anyone that's pretty new to politics. So with all of those assets, all of those resources, many Democrats are stunned, are absolutely positively stunned by the election results. And when you hear some of these numbers that we're going to dig into numbers that were shocking for me. What we know about those numbers is that Donald Trump, as I said, currently has 295 electoral college votes. That number can continue to grow. Kamala Harris is at 226. Donald Trump is at 72 million popular votes, 72 million, compared to Kamala Harris's 67 million. So obviously a big difference in popular vote as well as electoral college vote. But this is the number that just blew my mind. In the 2020 election, Donald Trump got a little more than 74 million votes. So he's was 2 million votes up in 2020 than he is currently in 2024. But Joe Biden, the guy that they said was too old, that was forced off the Democratic ticket, got 81 million votes, popular votes in 2020. So it's leaving so many Democrats scratching their heads saying, what happened to the 14 million? Yes, that's with an M, million votes that is the difference between the 81 million that Joe Biden got in 2020 and the 67 million that Kamala Harris got in this election. You can't win an election if you lose 14 million votes in a cycle. I remember having a conversation with Val Demings when she ran for Senate in the state of Florida. And she said the biggest issue was there were over 500,000 Democratic voters that were lost essentially in Florida. Either they defected to the Republican Party, they fell off the voting rolls, but somehow that state was in a deficit. So when she looked at why she lost her race to become a U.S. Senator for the state of Florida, it was pretty clear. There just weren't enough Democratic voters in the state of Florida to make her successful. So when we ask what happened to Kamala Harris and you hear these numbers, it's clear Democrats didn't show up. We did not turn out. 14 million of us, and I'm assuming we're still Democrats, those 14 million or some large portion of that 14 million still is, they sat the election out and they sat it out in key battleground states. And as a result, we are now, many of us in mourning. We know there were hundreds of folks at Howard University today as Kamala Harris gave her concession speech. I didn't get a chance to go to the election party. I had to work, had to remain in LA, had to be in Palm Springs, which is where I'm broadcasting live from today. My husband had a chance to go, good friends had a chance to go, and everyone has reported back to me that it was a somber day. Lots of tears today as close friends, family members, and supporters stood in solidarity with Kamala Harris, thanked her for her near flawless campaign, for her unwavering dedication, for her hard work, for her commitment to trying to save our democracy. You know, it's never easy to lose. And when you have a race with two people, there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. But how you lose, what that loss looks like is something that we as Democrats must examine. We've got to do an autopsy. We have to look at the numbers. We've got to dig into the data because we have to learn something from this election before it's midterms, yes, coming up in 2 years, and before we are right back in another presidential election. This 14 million vote loss should have every Democrat sitting on the edge of their seat asking, what the heck happened? And what do we do to fix this so that we can never, ever have an election where in one cycle we literally lose 14 million voters? When we come forward, we're going to continue to break down the results of yesterday's historic election, what some call the most consequential election of our lifetimes, the stunning loss of my good friend, my sister friend, Kamala Harris, who ran, as I said, a near perfect campaign, a loss to Donald Trump, who seemingly did everything in his power to lose, from being a convicted felon, an adjudicated rapist, making racial slurs, not disavowing others in his campaign for making racial slurs, not having any clear policies, flip-flopping on the most important issue of abortion when it comes to women's health care. I mean, the list goes on and on in terms of things that Donald Trump did that would make you think he was trying to sabotage the race and lose. But yet 72 million people voted for him, and he is victorious with 295 electoral college votes and still counting. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward.
Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. Are you an entrepreneur looking to take your business to new heights? KBLA Talk 1580 is your partner in success. Every day, we celebrate and elevate Black-owned businesses across our community. Our KBLA SMB Marketplace currently features The Cookie Dip, Badass Bakes, Hair Concoction, Higher Education Accreditation Consulting, LACC Radiology Technology Department, and Malik Books. Your business deserves to be heard. Let KBLA Talk 1580 amplify your voice and connect you with our powerful community of listeners. Email smb@kbla1580.com today. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
So the thing no one tells you about periods is that your flow changes every day, and so should your tampon size. Tampax has 5 absorbencies to match your changing flow. If it's uncomfortable to remove, go down a size. If it leaks, go up a size. And only Tampax has a leak guard braid to help give you up to 100% leak and odor-free protection. All-day comfort and protection for up to 8 hours for under $5 a month. Based on average U.S. consumer usage at manufacturer's suggested price, however, pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer, excludes 8-count packs.
Mommy, want to play a game with me and Dad?
Mommy's not feeling good.
You need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with Dayquil VapoCool. It's Dayquil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
Come on, honey. Let's let mommy rest.
You guys are amazing. And so is Dayquil VapoCool.
Dayquil VapoCool, the vaporizing daytime coughing, aching, fever, power through your day medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down. Get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
We are back, and this is our post-election coverage with Andrew Carl, professor at the University of Virginia, and Jamar Brown, former executive director of the Texas Democratic Party and current executive director of Color of Change, that is a political action committee. Thank you both, Dr. Carl and Jamar Brown. Let's just get the elephant in the middle of the room addressed, and that is that narrative that somehow Black men were going to break in some huge numbers for Donald Trump and could be the deciding, voters for a victory for him. The reality is that didn't happen. The elephant in the middle of the room was and is white voters. 54% of white voters voted for Donald Trump. That's 54% of white folks who voted in this election. And the majority of them voted for Donald Trump. That's 68% of the white men, and 59% of white women. So white voters make up, 54% of the whole voting population. And they were white men and white women. Number 1 and number 2 for Donald Trump. Third for Donald Trump were Latino men. And the voters that did fuel Kamala Harris's, 66 million voters. Number 1, no surprise, Black women, but number 2, Black men voting for Kamala Harris at 80+%. Professor Carl, what do you make of the election yesterday, or the results, I should say, of the election yesterday?
I mean, it's horribly demoralizing. I think, we are really staring into the abyss. And I think, this is something that, the Republican Party has been building toward total control. They have a contempt for democracy. This has been something they've been working toward for generations now. They now have their opportunity, and we're going to be suffering the consequences of it.
Yeah, Jamar, let's talk about these numbers. A lot of talk going into the election. I mean, days and days about Black men and polls about Black men all seem like one big distraction, right? Now we know Black men didn't do anything different in this election than what they've done historically in elections. Not a monolith, but we vote pretty consistently Democratic, no matter who's at the top of the ticket. And we did that in this election. White women, though, this is a group that we every election cycle focus on and say we're gonna, do differently, do better. And 59%, even though, and in Georgia, I think I saw a stat that in Georgia the percent 69, a state where women's reproductive freedoms have been stripped from them. What is going on with white women?
Well, Areva, I think that there is a real connection to the patriarchy here. And not even just the thing that folks will typically say about like white women voting with their husbands. I think it's just in general the same thing. There's lots of things that we heard, whether it's a CNN interview, etc. Right? People are like, I think Donald Trump can keep us safe, and I can make more money, quite frankly, with Donald Trump. And I think those two are the biggest reasons, even despite what he's done and the Republicans have done around reproductive care. I think they thought about their pockets and the safety, if you will, about the border and the community more so than their own reproductive rights. And we know that Donald Trump, especially if he has a trifecta, right, the White House, the Congress, and even now the Supreme Court, right, because folks aren't even talking that in the conversation, that even if we take anything to the court, it's even tilted in their favor as well. And so, he can actually pass a national abortion ban that he never committed to not passing. In this election. And so they took that risk in putting other communities in jeopardy at the same time.
Well, Dr. Carl, a lot of experts are pushing back, particularly African Americans, on this notion that this race was about the economy. They point to the improved nature of the economy, the jobs that Biden and Harris created, the largest number of jobs ever, the low Black unemployment rate, the stabilization of inflation, the outstanding way in which the markets are performing. And many believe that this race was about white supremacy. It was Donald Trump as an avatar for white supremacy and about upholding white supremacy. And that folks who are talking about the economy, that it just doesn't add up because, and they point to this saying, if Donald Trump were if Donald Trump were not white, if he was African American, and he had 34 criminal convictions, and he had been indicted 4 times, impeached twice, if he had no consistent plan on healthcare, if he just had a concept, if he had flip-flopped the way he has on abortion issues, if he talked about mass deportation of immigrants, if he hurled the kind of racial slurs that we saw coming from Donald Trump, using the B word when it comes to Nancy Pelosi, talking about shooting Liz Cheney, and the list just goes on, that we wouldn't hear voters saying, I held my nose and closed my eyes and voted for him because I'm so concerned about the economy. So help us understand the role of race. And I should just tell you, it looks like all the big media outlets have gotten a memo from their CEOs, their billionaire CEOs, like, let's not talk about race because we've got to go cozy up to Donald Trump. But on this show, we got to talk about race.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, if he was not a white man with that track record, he would have been disqualified long ago. I think, one of the things here, especially with white voters, is, his racism, his open racism and misogyny doesn't sort of, disqualify him, in part because, this doesn't affect them in ways, and I think, not every voter for Trump is a rabid racist, like consciously sort of driven by hate, but it's not a disqualifier for him. And they're indifferent oftentimes to the implications of these policies for other people. And I think that's one aspect that we need to sort of put on the table here. And I think, a lot of that as well can kind of go toward the Latino vote vis-a-vis undocumented workers. And I think, that is a really disturbing trend as well. I think, one of the things here that really I wish that that the Democratic Party especially needs to craft a message for. And we've seen this during 8 years of Obama, and we saw it during 4 years of Biden. The Republican Party has one goal when they're not in the White House. It's to undermine the economy, to make things to actually make things bad, and certainly to craft a narrative making it seem even worse. And, one of the things that the Democrats need to do is figure out ways to actually acknowledge, real pocketbook concerns, hardships, to actually sort of, make that something that, they recognize.
Let me push back a little on that, Dr. Carl, because Kamala Harris did that. I mean, she said over and over again, I know groceries are expensive.
Here was my last point. They need to, yes, she was doing that, but they also need to say that the problems you are facing are because of the Republican Party and what they are dedicated to doing, which is ultimately to destroying, the country so that they can have total power. And I think, that's the thing that
Professor Carl said that over and over and over again. At his rallies, he just hammered that point. He hammered the point, first of all, that the so-called good economy that people are fantasizing about under Donald Trump wasn't Donald Trump's economy to begin with, that it was 75 months of positive growth under the Obama administration, that Donald Trump tanked the economy with his poor handling of the pandemic, and that he was purposely creating issues around the economy when there wasn't issues. So I don't.
No, you're absolutely right.
Hold your point. We got to take a break. When we come forward, I want to talk more about this, because this economy, the economy stupid kind of point is what we're hearing over and over again from pundits. And I'm just not convinced that this is about the economy in any really way, shape, form, or fashion. Stay with us when we come forward. More on KBLA Talk 1580.
The right time. More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 things you should know from BIN News. New York Governor Kathy Hochul and Attorney General Letitia James are vowing to protect the rights of New Yorkers now that Donald Trump is heading back to the White House. James, who was black, notes her office took nearly 100 legal actions against Trump before, including over tax caps and the Affordable Care Act, and they're ready for round 2. A judge is rejecting Eric R. Holder Jr.'s appeal of his conviction nearly 2 years after he went to trial for murdering Nipsey Hussle. A 3-justice panel from an appeals court in California issued a decision that upholds the judge's previous ruling. Tennessee Republicans are basking in the glow of victory. Marsha Blackburn was reelected to her Senate seat with a win over Gloria Johnson. Blackburn congratulated Donald Trump on his victory and said it's time to turn the page on the Biden-Harris administration. And Senator-elects Angela Alsobrooks of Maryland and Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware are making history. They'll be the first Black women to serve in the Senate at the same time. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Starting in Orange County near Fullerton, 57 southbound before Orangethorpe. It's a broken down big rig tying up the middle lane. Turns out that rig is leaking fluid into the roadway. 57 south coming away from Diamond Bar, you're slow from Imperial Highway. Also a slow ride on the 91 eastbound through Anaheim Hills between Kramer, Glassell, and Gypsum Canyon. 105 eastbound just before you reach the 710 is a stalled vehicle in the middle lane.
Lowe's knows you want to get more value for the holiday. That's why as a My Lowe's Rewards member, you get new member deals every week on everyday essentials, tools, and more. Program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for full details, subject to change.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
When Clippers owner Steve Ballmer was planning to unveil the Intuit Dome this season, he had visions of Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, and Paul George as marquee attractions for his new arena. The Clippers have no idea when Leonard will be able to play. His right knee is still a problem. George will be in the Intuit Dome tonight, but he'll be playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. George's departure in the summer as a free agent magnifies the absence of star power for the Clippers, a 3-4 team that has lost 4 of its first 5 home games. In the 5 seasons George was with the Clippers, he averaged 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 4.5 assists. The Clippers won't admit it, but they really miss PG. With Leonard out indefinitely, the Clippers have had to rely on Harden. At 35, Harden is not the scoring machine he used to be. When Clippers fans see George tonight, They're going to wish he was still in a Clippers uniform. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black. Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580, where climate is king. Climate is king.
Black Women for Wellness and Stand LA are standing up against harmful oil drilling in South Los Angeles. Our Bad Neighbors campaign exposes the serious health risks of drilling in our neighborhoods. You've seen the billboards, posters, and coffee sleeves around South LA. Now join the movement to protect our health, our families, and our future. Visit bwwla.org/no-drilling to learn more and get involved. That's bwwla.org/no-drilling.
Your vote matters. It helps you fight for the things you care about, like protecting Social Security and supporting family caregivers. Voters 50 and over are the most influential voting bloc. You have the power to make candidates focus on the issues you care about, so you need reliable information to make sure your voice is heard. AARP's election guide has the most up-to-date information about when, where, and how to vote. Get the facts at aarp.org/election guides. Paid for by AARP.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline Nasal Spray.
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it.
Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
Mommy, want to play a game with me and Dad?
Mommy's not feeling good.
You need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with Dayquil VapoCool. It's Dayquil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
Come on, honey. Let's let mommy rest.
You guys are amazing. And so is Dayquil VapoCool.
Dayquil VapoCool, the vaporizing daytime coughing, aching, fever, power through your day medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
As we go a little something like this.
Hey, it is me, D.L. Hugo, and I am thrilled to be heard weekdays in my hometown on KBLA Talk 1580. So check out the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580. We got a whole lot to talk about, let me tell you.
That's not the real.
We are back, and Professor Andrew Carl and Jamar Brown are joining me in this hour, and Ed Sanders and Richard Green are going to join me in hour 2. This is our election audit of sorts. It's our evaluation of what happened in this election that led to Donald Trump becoming the 47th president of the United States, which led to him getting winning the popular vote by 74 million compared to Harris's 66 million. The Electoral College vote for Trump at this point is 295. I know we've been talking about the economy and whether the economy was the real issue for voters. I'm reading a Politico article, and boy, are the knives out. These are Democratic, Jamar, strategists, folks who've been paid millions and millions of dollars by probably Biden and Harris, pointing the finger, saying Biden, should have known he was too old, and the advisors around him shouldn't have ever let him run a second time, that he shouldn't have anointed Kamala Harris back when he picked her as VP because she had already flopped when she ran her own presidential campaign, that he shouldn't have stuck with her because her approval ratings as VP were low. Then they go in on Kamala saying, oh my gosh, she had no message. She couldn't distinguish herself from Biden. She didn't move to the center quickly enough. She did not, denounce the extremes. There were no real moments where she confronted Biden on his policies on the economy or the Middle East. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Are Democrats absolutely positively crazy? Really, is this hopeful? And this is two white men quoted in this article who've made, I know some of them have made tens of millions of dollars.
Well, and I think that's the thing, right? Because I think there's two ways to look at this, right? There's the white consultant class that they get hired on every campaign. You know it, Areva, as much as I know it, right? And they lead the thing, and if they don't get enough contracts, they're out there criticizing you, right?
Yes.
And then there's the grassroots
leaks to all the articles. So when you read these negative articles, don't wonder who's leaking, who's talking.
Yeah.
We already know.
Exactly. When Democratic strategist that's never named. And then there's this grassroots kind of effort and energy, right? And this conversation that's sort of happening. This tends to happen anytime you lose an election. I think that there is work that the party has to do, and there are lessons that the party has to learn. Now, the question that you asked me about, should Joe Biden have done things differently? That's a bigger party issue. I don't think that's just a Joe Biden issue in particular, because when you looked at the polls a year ago, when there was an opportunity for someone to run in a primary situation, whether it's Kamala Harris or anyone else, the numbers weren't the greatest then either. They were great enough for people to be confident in him to then therefore defeat Trump. Now, the thing that I think we're learning in this election is because now Trump has run against two women, right? A white woman and a black woman. I think what we're learning in that middle is not so much that anything's wrong with those particular women, but Trump has a way of appealing to a certain voter that sometimes doesn't get polled in the sample size, that it sometimes feels like they're overlooked in particular. And Trump really knows how to galvanize that anger. It also goes back to the point that y'all were discussing before the break, is around the economy. The economy is always an issue in every campaign. How people experience the economy is what I don't think the Democrats galvanize really on. And what we had to do at Color of Change when we talked to black voters in Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, and in these places is inflation. People don't understand what that means. Right, you have to go down and say, no, I'm going to fight price gouging. And I think she did some of that toward the end. But you got to go in and say, no, I'm going to fight these corporations that they can't just raise the prices or put the costs on you as consumers. Even when they were debating during the presidential debate about tariffs, people don't know what tariffs do, right? Tariffs are taxes on businesses. And then what do businesses do to keep their profits high? They move those costs onto the consumer. So then you end up paying $3, $4, $5 for gas. You end up paying $8 for a carton of eggs or whatever. But people don't know the inner workings. And Trump just runs around the country and says they can't keep your eggs and milk low, right? But there's so many intricacies, right, that's involved. And that's why it was more important for even Joe Biden when he was running, but then obviously Kamala Harris when she took over the ticket, to really dig deeper of how do we get here? And here's what we've done, and here's what we can continue to do, so that people feel that they were seen in the economy, in the election, in that way. And Trump was able to manipulate that in a lot of ways, unfortunately.
Okay, we get, though, to be fair to Kamala Harris, Professor Carl, 107 days. So that is that is an unheard of amount of time to do not only what the both of you are talking about in terms of the economy, these esteemed, well-paid consulting class folks in this article say she needed to distinguish herself from Joe Biden. She needed to guarantee to independent voters that she was going to govern from the middle. And I'm sitting here thinking, the woman was hanging out with Liz Cheney almost every week. She was, angering her liberal base by, talking about putting Republicans in her cabinet. It just seems like a job that no one, Professor Carl, could do, because everybody has a critique about what she should have done. And clearly Trump did none of it.
Yeah. And of course,
did zero. He sabotaged his campaign, and yet he has 74 million votes.
Yeah. I mean, these consultants are clearly trying to cover their behinds and ensure that they have a job, next cycle around. And you see this, over and over again. I think, again, the sort of Kamala Harris ran the best campaign possible under these circumstances. If Joe Biden had remained at the top of the ticket, this would have been an absolute wipeout. I mean, that was obviously where things were headed over the summer. But I think, one of the things here, I mean, going back to our previous, it's the economy and its racism. And what I mean by that is, we have, in moments of scarcity, in sort of times where there's fears about economic downturn, that is when you can exploit racism effectively. And I think this is something that Trump has really sort of mastered. And it's something that is, to our own, that is our own peril as a nation, is he's been able to sort of take these real anxieties and concerns around not just conditions now, but in the future, and exploit them, drive them up, and just continue, and then sort of point the finger at others and tap into latent racism that has always been there in the American electorate, especially amongst white voters. And I think this is where we really need to sort of work toward what Heather McGhee has described as the solidarity dividend. We need to sort of begin to make a proactive argument about how we are all stronger together. And I think, that is really where the party, I hope, will go. And in a sense, sort of work to, recognizing the racism amongst significant segments of the voters, but also at the same time working to sort of build solidarity that can overcome that. And I really believe that that's really the sort of path forward for now.
Well, when you think about a lot of these white suburban voters, they're not suffering. People's stock portfolios are doing better than ever. So again, when you talk about the economy, I was on a battleground state tour. I was where you were. I was in Philadelphia. I was in Detroit. I was in Milwaukee. And I was in impoverished neighborhoods. I mean, some of the poorest neighborhoods in this country. And as you said, people aren't thinking about inflation. They're just thinking about, they don't have enough money to make ends meet.
Right.
They are thinking about the economy in a very different way than an educated white woman in the suburbs is thinking about the economy. And clearly, maybe both motivated by one, the lack of, and maybe the white woman in the suburbs, has a 4,000 square foot house, just think she should have an 8,000 square foot house. So, maybe for her, there's some lack there too. I don't know. It just seems like to me right now, this economy argument can take us down some rabbit holes and cause us not to dig deep enough on some of these, I don't know, these intractable, insidious, deep-seated issues. Because also what we saw was a rejection of confidence, a rejection of compassion, a rejection of a notion of trying to move people who are marginalized ahead and give them, a seat at the table. So as much as this vote was for Donald Trump, this also was a vote against a lot of what Kamala Harris talked about. And just one last funny thing from this Politico article that you both should Google and read. Kamala Harris spent too much time surrounding herself with celebrities. Okay, people. All right.
You can't win, I guess. Yeah.
You cannot win when the whole race is a culture war race, right? Donald Trump stokes culture wars, and you go out and get people who connect with the culture, and then all of a sudden, you're a California elite. When we come forward, we got to talk about Latino men. Donald Trump says this deportation time, baby. So I don't really even know what Latino voters are thinking about, like somehow they're white or somehow they're going to be immune. We saw him implement his Muslim ban or try to do it on day one. Very different Supreme Court this time around. Very different attitude and mood in the country, one that suggests that deportation en masse could really happen this time. But Latino voters said, okay, no problem, put him in office. Doesn't matter, I guess, if my mother, grandmother, or any of my relatives get deported. We're going to see what that feels like if and when Donald Trump, carries out his promise. It's a promise to do that. When we come forward, KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're living with dry age-related progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avastin-captid Pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
Medicare open enrollment is here, and it's a time you can make changes to your health coverage. Yet, watch out for enrollment and marketing scams. Remember, Medicare will neither call you nor solicit your business. Guard your card. Never give out your Medicare number to strangers. Unsolicited calls, door-to-door visits, and emails are prohibited. Take your time. Don't feel pressured to make a quick decision. Report scams to our California Senior Medicare Patrol at 1-855-613-7080.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Autopsy Initiative provides a second autopsy free of charge for victims' families who have lost their loved ones due to a police-related death. The services offered through the initiative include the completion of a second autopsy, disclosure of preliminary findings, and a final autopsy report. A police-related death is when an individual is harmed by police officers using deadly force, which results in an individual's death. Police-related death includes in-custody deaths, including those that arise during contact with law enforcement officers during arrest, pursuit, booking, transport, or incarceration. The Autopsy Initiative has a team of board-certified pathologists on call. An autopsy request may be completed by anyone with a close relationship with the victim, which may include the victim's spouse, partner, relative, close friend, or lawyer. To request a free second autopsy for a victim of police violence, please visit knowyourrightscamp.com. That's knowyourrightscamp.com. Then click on Autopsy, then click on Request. At KBLA, we believe in justice for victims of police violence. We say their names, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and Professor Andrew Carl and Jamar Brown are joining me as we do our post-mortem on this 2024 election results that I think shocked everyone, particularly as it relates to the president as well. Not so shocking about the Senate, although everyone pretty much expected there to be a switch in the Senate, and there may be a bigger majority for Republicans than what was anticipated. The House still too close to call, but could easily break for Republicans. Republicans may end up with all the marbles. They may have the White House. They may have the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and the U.S. Supreme Court. And if Donald Trump gets his way, we could see Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito retire and be replaced by two very young, super conservative folks like Eileen Cannon, even, who's on that district court in Florida, could be at the Supreme Court level, because if they control the Senate, anything Donald Trump wants, Donald Trump will get. As it relates to judicial appointments, we could expect him to flood the zone with conservative judges and transform our judiciary and our judicial system for decades to come. So this is bad news. We can, we've been, as Black women and lovers of democracy, we've been trying to cheer each other up, but we've got to just keep it real, like Elizabeth Warren said in her Instagram post, that this is bad news. This is bad stuff that's happening. And I don't think, Professor Carl, anybody has yet an appreciation for how bad Donald Trump and his minions and the folks he's going to assemble without guardrails this time, because he won't be picking folks like John Kelly, who will tell the truth. And I don't think voters, particularly Latino voters, that voted for Donald Trump in larger numbers, the number 3 voting block for him, have an understanding of how bad this is going to be for them in particular.
No. And I mean, here's the thing. It's, if there's any silver lining to this really, upsetting moment, it's, now they have control. And, it's a sort of, if you broke it, you bought it. There's no denying sort of what lies ahead will be on the Republicans' feet. And I think one of the really disturbing things about, but also devilishly effective strategies that Trump uses on things like sort of mass deportations, is that you have a significant segment of the Republican voters who think that he's just saying things. Like, they don't believe him. They just think that it's just talk, and like they've been conditioned to think that politicians just say things. They all lie, which is partly why, he can lie, every time he opens his mouth, and it really doesn't, have that effect that it should. But then, so he has that segment who just don't believe he's going to do what he says he does, and they vote for him anyway. And then you have this other segment that actually really does believe he's going to do these things. And so now, what's going to happen? Is he actually, because mass deportation on the scale of this, that would be an absolute societal catastrophe, unlike anything we've seen in this nation's history. Or again, you're going to have a disillusioned segment of voters, and he can't blame it on the Democrats. Like, he has control. So, I think, this is going to be a moment of truth, if there ever will be one, for his supporters.
Well, you're right. There are people who say, oh, don't, he's just, it's just bluster, right? Mm-hmm. They're not real policy statements. They're not things that he's going to try to implement. But he told us before he was going to build a wall. He talked about a Muslim ban, and he made efforts to build a wall. Mexico didn't pay for it. He didn't finish it. And he did try to implement a Muslim ban. I don't think he's just talking when he says there's going to be mass deportation. This is a party of white, basically, supremacists like folks who really have disdain for immigrants. So, Jamar, I don't think there's any joking about trying to deport immigrants, but yet Latinos obviously didn't think it was serious, or maybe they think they're white, or they think they're immune from his racist deportation policy.
Yeah, well, we've been seeing kind of this trend, if you will, over the last couple election cycles, actually. I think this is the largest shift that we've seen, in particular, in this election, because it's not just at the presidential level. Just like you're talking about, we're waiting on some of the results for the House, in states like Texas and Arizona and those sort of places, and especially Florida, where you see that. The thing is that I particularly think of, at the end of the day, is I don't even think it's about them not thinking that it's not them that's going to be deported or that their families are going to be at risk. I actually think that there's something that Donald Trump represents that is very similar. And I was actually having this conversation with someone about, why more white men were voting for Trump or have been voting Republican. And I think we're seeing that in the Latino community is there's this almost like masculine thing about Trump, and what we've been talking about over the last couple of cycles is how toxic masculinity is, but there's still some connection to that masculinity that people are attracted to. So you see that with the votes with white men, you're seeing that trend with the votes with white women, and I think now you're seeing a bigger shift in the trends with the Latino community, and it's this, we're going to fight the system, we're going to fight the establishment. I'll tell you I'm fighting for you whether I'm not. And I think that a lot of those particular pieces, that's what people are connecting to. I don't even think it's the issues. I think it's his personality, what they believe him to represent, what he leads them to believe he will do for them, not knowing on the other side with a court that will not hold him accountable and that has already said he's immune, that they actually could be in harm's way. They're thinking about the person and how he disconnects from the establishment versus every single issue like we're talking about.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. People disconnect from his policy. In fact, they don't even know what his policies are. And you're right.
He doesn't know what they are.
It's personality. People like him. They buy into their. A lot of people are aspirational. They see him as this, wealthy man with 5 wives and gold toilet bowls or whatever. And people we know in this country, many want to be that. They want to be this real estate developer. They want to be a man with a private jet. If you look at old being 1990s, 2000s sitcoms and dramas, Donald Trump is referenced in a lot of, our TV, our movies, our media, because he was that guy, the it guy, the cool guy in New York that had big parties that, showed up with beautiful women on his arm. So he has been a part of this American culture for decades. And many people can't divorce their image of him and this thought of him as this billionaire, cool, rich guy with lots of women from, the dangerous politician that he is. I am, though, surprised, Professor Carr, real quickly, white women, the attacks that Donald Trump made on women during this election. I mean, I can't say they were worse than the ones he made in his first presidential election. They were just consistent with the attacks that he continues to make. And again, white women, 59% breaking for Donald Trump, 69% in Georgia. They just say, we don't care. Call Nancy Pelosi the B word, say you're going to shoot Liz Cheney. We just don't care.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing: is that I think a lot of white women voters, they don't think that like there's going to be a national abortion ban. They don't fear the sort of consequences in a way that they should. And here's, I think going back to what you said about Trump as having this cult of personality, I think that's a really great way to explain this phenomenon, because the Republican Party's policies are deeply unpopular. Like if you go down through the list and you ask voters, do you support this? No, 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 no. Like these are unpopular positions, which is why he is like the perfect vehicle for the Republican Party, because he has this charisma that, attaches to people in ways that no other Republican politician can. And I think, this is why, when he shuffles off this mortal coil, there's no one to replace him within the Republican Party. Certainly not someone like J.D. Vance. I mean, it's certainly not someone like Ron DeSantis. I mean, these people have absolutely no connection with voters in the way he has, this kind of mystical hold he has, which again, I think, is something that, transcends even the very real fears that many, women should have and have shown in voting, to protect abortion rights in other elections in recent years. I think it's just there's something bizarre happening here. I think we're still muddling our way through it. Someday we'll be able to figure out what's going on here. But I think it is that there is that cult of personality at play here, and it is about Trump and his ability to speak to a segment of the electorate and connect with them in ways that no other politician has before.
Well, and let's not forget racism and misogyny.
Of course.
Having a Black woman be the president of the United States was just a bridge too far for a lot of white voters, a lot of Latino voters. We know there's a lot of Black hatred, anti-Blackness in the Latino community. If you live in Los Angeles, we have lots of evidence of it, and there's evidence of it historically as well. Really stunning results. I don't know. There's going to be a lot written, a lot said about this election, and we have to make sure that we continue to center some of the significant issues around race and gender, because until we grapple with those issues in this country, we can talk, until we're blue in the face about the economy and immigration and policies, because as you said, most people don't even know what those policies are, but they do know what issues of race are. They do know what issues of gender look like in this country. Thank you so much, Professor Carl. Thank you so much, Jamar. Always a pleasure to be in conversation with both of you. We're going to continue our election post-mortem when we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.